this is Alina, and you're listening to Your PharmD Bestie.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Your PharmD Bestie. Today, I have a special guest, my co resident, Parker. And the topic that we wanted to go over today is about the process of applying for PGY2. And if you are particularly in the UC system, it's a little bit different. There's something called an early commit process, which we will dive a little bit deeper into during this episode. But let me just have Parker introduce himself first. We can do like name, brief background, your what you are going to be pursuing basically in your PGY2.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Parker. I am a PGY1 acute care pharmacy resident at UC Davis Health. I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana, and I went to school at Purdue University. So I moved to Sacramento just about 6 months ago. And for my PGY2, I early committed to critical care here at UC Davis Health.
Awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank
Super
you.
exciting. So I guess just to go a little bit into the background behind that, um, we can maybe transition into talking about what a PGY2 is and like how would you describe it to someone in a way to help them decide if they want to pursue a PGY2.
Yeah, I think a great way to describe what a PGY2 is first looking at what a PGY1 is. So, a PGY1 is kind of the basis of pharmacy clinical knowledge, right? Everybody goes through a PGY1 to get the base level clinical knowledge to be a pharmacy clinician in a hospital. PGY2 is where we specialize into something and we learn more about a specific area. So for me, in a critical care PGY2, I will be specializing in critical care medicine, and I will be learning the intricate details of what makes a critical care pharmacist different from a just general clinical pharmacy like for IM. So this kind of allows you to get the best scope of what you want to pursue in a career. So I feel like that's the biggest difference where you think of PGY1 being very general and learning a lot about different areas of pharmacy to become a well rounded pharmacy clinician. And then PGY2, you kind of hone in on certain skills to go into a specific career area.
Awesome. Thank you for that background. And I think that really explains this whole process well. So for people who are interested in perhaps specializing in something later down the line, I definitely recommend that you look into what these PGY2 programs are. And if you are applying for a PGY1, to consider if that program does offer PGY2 programs in your particular field of interest. So now let's dive a little bit deeper into this early commit process. Early commit within the UC system, essentially there's like a mini match that occurs between all the UCs and the residents who are currently at those UCs. So the whole application process starts much earlier than the usual match conducted by ASHP. From your opinion, Parker, having gone through the early commit process, how would you say it might differ from like a traditional PGY2 match?
Yeah, so I think it's also called SWEC or system-wide early commitment for the UC systems, and it definitely differs from the traditional match. It's kind of a more condensed, like you said, like a mini match almost, where instead of having applicants from all over the country apply for a position, you're only having applicants that are within the UC systems currently applying for positions within the UC system. So it makes it a little more personable. You really kind of know these programs, especially for me. I applied for the critical care UC Davis position and I had a rotation with them and I knew that I really loved this program. And so it kind of gives you the opportunity to apply for those programs that you already have a good connection with. But it also gives you the opportunity to expand out. If you wanted to apply for a different position, maybe at like UCSF or UC San Diego, I had the opportunity to do that. I think there's really good parts of early commitment. It takes the stress of the traditional match off of you, especially at mid-year when you're trying to get like interviews. I had a lot of co-residents kind of doing that where they were getting interviews and they were trying to kind of, get together who they want to apply for in the traditional match. So you kind of step over that hurdle of the match within January, February time.
Yeah, that is actually really true. And I also know um, that you're absolutely right. Like I think people who may not decide to do the early commits may have to apply separately through ASHP and then go through that whole match process and interview. That's a whole other level of responsibilities and stress on itself. On the other hand, I also know people in the past who were considering on early commit but decided not to. So I think not that I can speak for them, but if you are listening and you're considering early commit, but you decide that maybe you want to wait and expand your options beyond just the UC, that's also an option for you as well. So early commit, I think, has a lot of pros and cons, as Parker mentioned.
Mhm. Yeah, I think another big pro for this is especially like um, for me, I moved across the country and I was really like UC Davis and I knew that I really wanted to stay. So the early commitment process made it really easy for me. And then a con of that, especially I know some health systems may not do it how UC does it, where we
Mhm.
kind of compete for all the positions. So it kind of broadens the pool of applicants a little bit, which can make it a little more competitive, especially for some of the more desired positions like critical care. It makes it a little harder and there's a bit more competition within the system wide early commitment, whereas some hospitals may just do a kind of single center early commitment process where you get the first shot at, having this position. So there are, again, like you said, there are pros and cons of both. But I do think the system wide early commitment does provide the most opportunity for all residents in the UC system.
Thank you for that input.
Mhm.
Um, and it's great that I can have you speaking about this since you got through it yourself. I'm a little bit curious, just diving a little bit deeper for you. When did you first start thinking about PGY2?
Yeah, so I kind of had a very unique perspective coming into PGY1. I didn't have a ton of acute care appies. And so I really was just like out in I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I made that very clear with my RPD. I was like, I want to try everything and see what works. And so I tried critical care, I tried oncology, I tried emergency medicine. And I even tried behavioral health like before the match, just in case I wanted to go that route. And it ended up for me being critical care, being the one. But I started kind of thinking about this after my first rotation, really. Like when I found like critical care, I was like, oh, okay, I really like this. Um, I started thinking about early commitment. I started reaching out to my preceptor to say, hey, would you write a good letter of recommendation for me, like coming up? So I think it's always good to be on top of thinking about PGY2, um, and kind of using your clinical experiences and writing down like any times that you made an improvement or you made an intervention on these rotations, because those are things that the interviewers are going to ask you. They're going to say, when is a time that you made a recommendation on a critical care rotation and what was the outcome, right? So it's good to like keep track of that. And if you already know what you want to do and you're like, oh, I'm dead set on critical care, and you know that going into residency, then I would just start doing that right off the bat. But for me, I didn't really know until I kinda had these rotations and I knew that critical care was right for me.
Yeah, I think you make a really great point there. Like, definitely be on top of it as early as you can. And the fact that you communicated this with your RPD from the beginning so that they were also aware of what your interests were. And so they could help you like tailor those beginning rotations to help you figure it out, especially for early commit when the timeline starts much earlier. Really, like it's pretty fast from what I've observed. So
Mhm.
definitely like great tips there. Did you ever have going through this process, were there ever any times where you had doubts or like hesitations about early committing or even pursuing a PGY2?
Yeah, I think, like, again, from, like, where I was coming from, I was kinda all over the place, like, not really knowing what I wanted to do, and for me, like, what really solidified it was basically, I took onc out, and I basically sat and said, "I either emergency medicine or critical care." And I was, like, kinda weighing the both parts. You have to think about, like, career-wise, like, what's the best for you? And there was hesitation, you don't you have to choose one, and, I really thought about this for a long time, and I figured that critical care would be the best for me because it gives me the most flexibility as a clinician. There's room to kind of grow in any possible way as a critical care pharmacist. I feel that critical care is kind of like the Olympics of pharmacy. You just kinda gotta be good at, like, pretty much everything, and for me, that challenge was something that really was inspiring to me, and so I knew that for me, in a place where I could grow the most would be critical care. So I just kinda weighed those options and kinda looked at, career-wise, where do I wanna be in 10 years? So I guess that was, like, some of my hesitation is, like, deciding between what I wanna do given that emergency medicine and critical care are pretty
Mhm.
similar, but kind of looking at two different sides of a patient, right? The initial stabilization and then the
Yeah.
follow up. Um, so I think that's a little bit of my hesitation, but early committing, doing it, and deciding, I have had no regrets, and I am completely so excited to continue on here for next year. So
I can sense the excitement through the screen.
yeah.
But that's awesome, Parker. Thank you for sharing about that.
Mhm.
Um, if it's okay with you, I'd like to transition to talk a little bit more about the timeline and just the process of the early commit. So we hinted at this process starting pretty early on, but from your standpoint, could you walk us through like when you had to start submitting applications and like putting things together to submit the application?
Yeah, so, we kinda had a meeting it was almost towards the end of September when they started mentioning early commitment, and we kinda got a rundown of how it's gonna work, where the website's gonna be, who's gonna be facilitating it, and so kinda early October, so we needed to have our, like, applications in by I think it was, like, end of October-ish, so, that was when so the entire month of October was when I was starting to, like, prepare my applications, get my supplementals ready, get my LOI ready, get my, um, LOR writers on board, and so that's kinda the timeline. It's again, you, like, start clinical rotations in August, so if you're thinking about it, you get August, September, and then some of October, basically. So it's really not a lot of time. So you get basically 2.5 rotations before you have to make a decision, which can be really daunting, and especially I think when we talked about, like, the hesitation too, I think that's a big player of why people hesitate. I know a couple people who were hesitating at that just because it is so early on, and sometimes people aren't as sure of what they wanna do. So I think that is, like, probably the biggest, like, reason people may not wanna do early commit. But so I feel like that mid-October time, I was getting my applications ready, and then I submitted by the end of October, early November. And then usually, I think I heard back within, like, a week or so if I got an interview, and then interviews were in the middle of November, and then we find out at the end of November if what position we got.
Yeah, it's a very tight deadline.
Mhm.
So you definitely have to be on top of it. And as Parker mentioned earlier, like you come into BGY1 with a CV because you have to have that for applications. But if you can like every month keep updating your CV along the way, like that will help a lot when you're making these decisions that require a quick turnaround. So I definitely see where you're coming from with that. This is a question that I've been kind of curious about, and I've actually heard a lot of other people ask about this too, but would you say there's a huge difference between how you prepared to apply for PGY1 versus how you prepared to apply for PGY2?
I absolutely think there is a complete
Mhm.
difference. It comes down to pretty much everything that you are writing in your application. So, your CV is going to be about the same. List your rotations, list your experiences, your leadership role within residency. But when it comes to the LOI and your supplementals, that is more targeted more specifically to critical care now. So instead of your PGY1 LOI saying, I'm interested in these areas, and this is how my strengths in college have prepared me to thrive in this residency, and how what I can give to this health system and what your health system can help me achieve my goals. Now it's this is what I want. This is my experience that I've had, and this is what I am wanting to continue to grow in, right? So you have to be more specific. And I feel even for these specific programs, you really have to know the programs well. And that was very evident when I was in the interview. I was asked very specific questions to UC Davis, like, why UC Davis? Like, why do you want to be a critical care pharmacist? And you really have to know those answers to pursue that. Whereas I feel like PGY1, they're not gonna expect you to know, really, like, they're not gonna say, "Why do you wanna be what is your long-term goal, and why do you know you want that?" It's not really about that, right? Because PGY1
Mhm.
is about getting a broad knowledge, right? But PGY2 is way more specified, and you really have to be on board with what you want to do, right?
Mhm.
And they can I'm not to, like, scare anyone, but they can absolutely tell if you're not 100% on board, because it is like what you are going to go into a career as, right? And so they want to make sure that you're 100% on board and that they're 100% going to be able to support you through your goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I can definitely see that. I think having been through, like, interviews myself, right, and then also be on the other side, it's you can definitely tell if someone is super very passionate about something and they're sure about it, and I can see that for a PGY2 program, especially when they do have so many candidates who want to pursue, this competitive specialized field, they want to make sure that that candidate is committed, for sure. Absolutely. You kind of talked about this a little bit, but outside of being sure and like knowing what questions you wanted to ask to portray that you are really committed to this and especially at this program, what else would you say do you think um, could make your application strong?
Yeah, I think really, I think, like, the first couple months of residency is your best time to shine, and to really show your commitment to, like, your growth. So, I think finding the right letter writer as well. So, I had my first rotation was with, my ICU preceptor, and they were the one that wrote the letter of recommendation for me, and that was, like, right around the time it was my first residency rotation. I just got licensed as a pharmacist in California, so there was a lot of pressure, but I feel that I grew the most, and so I would challenge you as you're looking for PGY2s, find the preceptor that can talk about your growth, right? I feel like that's the biggest strength, especially just in residency in general, when people are looking for people to join residency, they wanna see that you want to grow, right? Residency is about learning, and so having that preceptor watch you grow in confidence and become like even stronger than where you were just a month ago, I think having a preceptor that can talk about that is a really big strength that you can show in your LORs. For your LOIs, I think again being very specific with the program and what the program, how you fit with the program, and how the program
Mhm.
can help you reach your specific long-term goals. And you have to be very specific because, again, like we said, it's not PGY1 where it's more general. This is critical care. You need to have a specific critical care goal. So, I think those are like some of the big things that I kind of used to kind of make my application strong. And yeah.
Thank you for sharing about that.
Mhm.
I definitely agree, and I can't even imagine, like, how tough it was at the beginning to, like, be adjusting from in a new city, like, having moved across the country and, like, having to think about all of this at the same time, but it really does show how committed and passionate you are about this. So, again, like, I think that's awesome. Um, is there something when you're going through this process that, like, you look back on and you would maybe consider having done differently?
Um, that's a good question. I don't have anything off the top of my head. I think everything just really worked out really well for me. I I don't have any maybe yeah, I really can't think of anything. It's kinda weird in that way, but maybe I don't have any regrets about doing it, so I'm just like, not really. I don't really know, like, anything that I would do differently. I guess maybe, looking I guess I kinda looked at the application, like, a little later, and so maybe getting, a good grasp on, what the supplemental questions were gonna ask might have been a little helpful. But even then, I still felt that I answered them well, and yeah, I don't really know.
No, I think that's super fair. I think that's super fair. Um, yeah, no, I'll take that for sure. I think everyone will find like some way through this process, whether or not you end up applying for a PGY2 or not. And I think like inevitably, like sometimes you do look back and you think like, oh, I wish I had done that a little bit differently or done something better, but
Yeah.
that's not always the case. So I
Mhm.
think that's just even more of a positive sign, for you, like, and where you're heading towards, so that's
Yeah.
awesome. Um, we are nearing the end of the episode. Something that I wanted to touch upon for listeners is that while both Parker and I are committed to a PGY2, it's not necessarily always the required pathway for anyone who wants to pursue pharmacy. So I just wanted to give like a little, not like a disclaimer, but a little note of reassurance that if you go through pharmacy school and residency and you realize that like, hey, maybe I want to pivot or maybe PGY2 isn't exactly what I'm looking for, that's okay too. But I do hope that this episode allows us to share some of our insights. And if you are interested in a PGY2, it can help you prepare for what that might look like. So with that, I think I'll open it up, Parker, if you have any like last minute tips or advice, comments that you want to add for listeners before we close it off.
I don't have any other comments, but thank you for having me on. It was a great time talking with you, and it was a pleasure sharing my experience and having the opportunity to share my experience with your listeners. So thank you.
Thank you, Parker. I really appreciate you coming on to and agreeing to be a guest. I do really think that the advice that you shared and the insights that you shared will be helpful and very impactful for future pharmacists. So I appreciate you too. For listeners, thank you for listening to this episode and following along. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review or comment. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it in a DM or leave it in the comments, and we will get to those in our future episodes. So, thank you. Have a great day, everyone.